Welcome back, everyone. This is Dave from Corman Productions, here to talk about Quantum Leap, Season 1, Episode 5, Double Identity. Taking place on November 8th, 1965, the episode's description reads as follows. Sam leaps into a Mafia hitman who may not live long since he is romancing the godfather's girlfriend. Also, an attempt to bring Sam home causes the 1965 East Coast blackout. The episode's original air date was April 21st, 1989. Before going any further into this video, I will tell you two things. One, this is not a spoiler-free video, so if you haven't yet watched the episode, please go and do so, and then come and watch my video. Secondly, if you like this video, please hit me up with a like, share, comment, and please subscribe to my channel. Now, this episode isn't quite as good as I remembered it. It's still good compared to first season, but not quite as good as I remember originally. This is down to the pacing issues, which actually really plagued the entirety of Season 1 up to this point. There's just a lot of meandering around. However, there are quite a few things to recommend about this episode, up to and including the guest cast, which is terrific. Probably the goofiest subplot in the entire series run, the type of thing that we typically don't see after Season 1. Actually, I'm not even sure it's fair to call it the subplot, because it's basically the main plot of this episode. And there's just some terrific scenes throughout the episode. So let's get to it, shall we? Sam leaps in and finds himself with his pants around his ankles with a woman above him, named Teresa. She tells him, "Frankie, you were terrific. If I'm lying, I'm dying." Teresa is played by Terry Garber, who is still acting to this day and has appearances in a number of soap operas. And she is absolutely phenomenal in this episode. Terry, or rather Teresa, exits the scene. I guess technically they both do. And we hear Sam's inner monologue, where he's basically learned that his name is Frankie, thanks to Teresa. He also learns that he's quite good looking, by judging by the image in the mirror. He finishes his monologue by saying, "Okay, you got a job to do. So whatever it is," and then he says out loud, "Let's get to it, killer," which is funny because he's leaped into a Mafia hitman, though he doesn't quite know that just yet. We cut to a wedding where Teresa seems to be quite active, talking to a couple of women and then flirting with some men, or they really are flirting with her, not so much the other way around. And we see a quick shot of Mark Margolis, who's playing Adriano in this episode. He's not all that significant to the plot, but where he is significant is he is an actor well known for Better Call Saul, as well as originating on Breaking Bad. He plays Hector, a man in a wheelchair who can only communicate via bell, and he's an iconic character on that series. In both series, really. We see Mafia godfather Don Gino playing Bocce with Primo Lopama. Now, these are a couple of interesting actors. Don Gino is played by Mike Genovese, who has the honor of appearing in this series twice, one of the few people that have done so. He, of course, appears in this episode as well as in the series finale, as a completely different character. He has appearances in Judging Amy, NYPD Blue, and Babylon 5. In addition to being a fine actor, he has a fantastic voice. This series, more than any other, really relies on its guest cast, because the only two main characters that appear in this series is Sam, played by Scott Bakula, and Al, played by Dean Stockwell. That's it. Occasionally you'll see a Dennis Wolfberg as Gushy, Deborah Pratt as Ziggy, but that's about it. This series is kind of like an anthology series in a lot of ways, in that every week it's a different story, a different setting. The only difference is that you see Sam and Al in every single episode, which is not always the case in anthology-like series. So the guest stars can make and break episodes. And I can think of at least one episode in which a brutal guest cast absolutely sinks an episode. And I'm thinking of one in Season 2, which we will get to discussing then. The other actor in this scene is Nick Cassavetes. And I recognize the name, though I didn't know why originally. I'm more familiar with his directorial work than his work as an actor. He was responsible for the 2002 movie John Q, which is a Denzel Washington picture that isn't actually all that good. It features a great performance by Denzel Washington, but it deals with the issues of healthcare in a sledgehammer fashion. There's the 2004 flick, The Notebook, starring Rachel Gosling. Wow, I screwed that one up. It's not Rachel Gosling, it's Ryan Gosling and Rachel McAdams. That mistake is too funny to delete, so I'm going to keep it in. The movie is, kind of soap opera-ish. It's a romantic chick flick that is very popular among the women. And of course, Alpha Dog, the 2000 flick starring Amelia Hirsch, Justin Timberlake, an early role for Anton Yelchin, who would appear as Chekhov in the rebooted Star Trek movies before he sadly passed away, as well as starring Bruce Willis and Olivia Wilde. He has acting appearances in Face Off, Life, which is an Eddie Murphy flick, and Hangover Part 2. The two of them are playing bocce. I had no idea what that was, so I looked it up. According to Wikipedia, bocce is a ball sport belonging to the Boulez family, closely related to the British bowls and French pétanque, which I have no idea if I'm pronouncing correctly, but it's with a common ancestry from ancient games played in the Roman Empire, developed into its current form in Italy. There's some kind of dispute between the two men about the game, so Teresa intervenes in a fashion that would be embarrassing to describe, so I'm not going to. But I would suggest you watch the episode and find out for yourself. Don Gino is annoyed, saying that they could have worked this out for themselves. But she correctly points out that nobody is going to speak up against him, for fear of being killed. If she's lying, she's dying. Gino pays up. Apparently there's a wager on this game. And then he takes Teresa away. Don Gino takes her into a garage or something and says, "When you showed up at my daughter's wedding, I thought that meant you wanted to be friends again." And Angela corrects him, saying, "I'm here because Angela asked me to be her beautician." Don Gino goes on to say that now he thinks she's there to embarrass him. Teresa points out that he's the godfather. He doesn't need to cheat at bocce. It's a pretty good line, but the line delivery is even better. Eventually, Don Gino is won over. He says, "That's what I like about you, Teresa. You talk to me like I'm an ordinary gentleman." Don Gino suggests they meet up at the old place to engage in some activities, but Teresa doesn't want to. Don Gino accuses her of being with another man, and Teresa responds, "Yeah, totally. There's someone out there who's suicidal. Everybody knows that if anybody above the age of 14 says hi to me, they're dead. Okay, so if I'm 15 and I happen to say hi to Teresa, I'm gonna die." Gotcha. Don Gino doesn't seem to believe her. And Teresa fires back with, "Yeah, and you didn't believe when I said it was over either." And of course, Don Gino says that it's not over. and then he ends up smacking her or something. He calls her a real piece of work. And so are you, sir. I'm reasonably confident that you're not going to have me killed because of that comment. We cut to Sam in the wedding, wandering around. Well, this looks more like the reception. Wow, good to see you, Sam. It seems like forever since the last time I saw you. Anyway, a couple of older Italian women start talking to him, and he realizes, oh, he's supposed to speak Italian. Well, that might be an issue. But he just kind of laughs his way through it. He's saved, and I say saved with quotation marks, by his brother. Or at least I assume it's his brother. Primo wants him to sing. Sam seems rather nervous by that prospect. His other brother announces that Sam will sing for them. And then he asks his wife, what would you like him to sing? Whatever it is, he'll sing it. And it turns out that she wants him to sing Volare, which apparently he sings quite well. The only problem is, Sam does not know the words. He's pushed on stage with a shit-eating grin, and that's when Al Calvici shows up at the 8-minute and 42-second mark. Good timing, Al. Al helps him with the words, and Sam proceeds to sing in very bad and hilarious fashion, while Don Gino, with the Mark Margolis character, watches on less than impressed. Now, the funny thing about this is Scott Bakula is actually a terrific singer, so they worked in him having to sing throughout the series for that exact reason. Don Gino is also with Primo, Sam Beckett's father, or rather Frankie's father. These are always fun to talk about for that exact reason. Anyway, Don Gino wants the person who's sleeping with Teresa found. Well, that's kind of awkward because it happens to be his son. In Don Gino's attic, Al is talking about retrieving Sam Beckett. It's potentially his chance to go home. Sam asks when, and the answer, of course, is after Ziggy has concocted his crazy-ass plan. But Al just says, as soon as Sam, or rather Ziggy, has the information he needs. And Al is sweating, and he's wearing a Hawaiian shirt that I am absolutely jealous of. Al wants to know where Sam popped in. But we go on a long tangent about the year and what's going on during this year. LBJ is president, Sam is 10 years old, and he has a crush on some girl. And it's revealed that Al engaged in activities in the 4th grade, which is more than a little advanced, I would say. Eventually, Al discovers that there's some wine and some blankets in Don Gino's attic. And he asks Sam, "What were you doing, Sam? Ha ha? Wink wink? Nudge nudge?" Sam avoids the question by asking, "Why are you so hot?" Sam points out that the imaging chamber is air-conditioned. Hey, that's a little bit of a memory coming back to his Swiss cheese memory. Not anymore, says Al. He says that Ziggy has shut down all non-vital functions. Sam asks, why? And it's because his Ziggo is as big as his microchips. And because Ziggy is concocting a pretty crazy plan. And Al says to Sam, well, it looks like you popped in a little bit late. And Sam sheepishly says, sort of. And then he asks, how did you know? And Al replies, that Frankie's condition left very little to the imagination. Sam wants to know who Frankie is. And it turns out that Frankie is a hitman, which Sam does not react well to. Now, this episode, more than any other, makes me wonder what a darker, grittier version of this show would be. Because it seems like having Sam leap into a hitman and to not really do anything with that is a serious missed opportunity. But I guess putting Sam into a situation where he might have to put a hit on somebody and do so incompetently is a little too dark for the show at this point in the game. Though as the series progresses, it does not hesitate to range dark, though perhaps not this dark. Still, if you're not willing to go there, why put Sam in this situation in the first place? Sam asks him, "What am I here to do?" But Al doesn't have an answer, because apparently the research department is on Ziggy's non-essential electricity list, which seems pretty insane given the premise of the show. In fact, at no point is Sam ever told exactly what he's here to do, other than Ziggy's zany plan to get him home. Sam has pretty much the same reaction I do. He says that God, time, or fate will leave him whenever he's completed whatever he was supposed to do that went wrong in Frankie's life. And Al says correct. And then Sam points out, wouldn't it be great to know what that is? And Al says, not necessarily, because Ziggy says that we can leap you out of here and get you home with 97.3% chance of that happening if we follow Ziggy's instructions to the letter. Oh, okay. Well, what are Ziggy's instructions? Al says simply that Sam is just supposed to do whatever Frankie would do with this life until Ziggy comes up with instructions. Well, gee whiz, that's very helpful. And what if the thing that Frankie was supposed to prevent happens before Ziggy comes up with his instructions? Sam wanders over to his gun and asks Al, what if I'm supposed to use this? And Al simply says, well, I take the safety off. And Sam says, Al, that's not funny. Well, yeah, it kind of is. You just have to appreciate the joke. But Al has disappeared. Just like that. We cut to Sam walking with his brothers down the street. And they act like a couple of doofuses. Sam eventually spots Teresa. And he starts to walk into the salon. And his brother's like, what, you're going to get a haircut from Teresa? And Sam's like, yeah. And he walks in. Honestly, I have no idea what possesses Sam to do this. Thinking with his nether regions, I guess. But that's not exactly the Sam Beckett character that we all know and love. Anyway, he goes into the salon and gets a bunch of weird looks. Because, as it turns out, in 1965, men were not getting their haircuts in women's salons. Sam speculates that maybe, just maybe, he's there to start the unisex revolution. He asks Teresa if he can get a trim, and Teresa looks scared out of her ever-loving mind. She shoos away her current customer, and Sam sits down, after suggesting he needs a shampoo first. We briefly cut to the outside, where their dad has joined them to look in to see what his son is up to. Sam sits down, and Teresa asks him if he's trying to get them killed. And it's then that Sam discovers that Teresa is Don Gino's girl, or at least Don Gino thinks so. And wouldn't you know it, Don Gino happens to stop by and sees Sam with Teresa. He tells Primo condolences on the death of his son. But Primo comes up with some BS, saying it was his idea to go in there because sometimes women in salons gossip. And this very well could be a means to gather information, specifically who is sleeping with Teresa. Don Gino doesn't quite believe it, but he's willing to give Sam the benefit of the doubt. He's going to go in there and ask him the question, what are you doing in here? And if he gives him the wrong answer, bye-bye Sam Beckett. Sam soon finds himself face to face with Don Gino, who's asking for a razor a straight razor. He's gonna give Sam a shave. Because women don't like 5 o'clock shadows. After blabbering on about 5 o'clock shadows being in at certain points in the timeline, which is not something Don Gino should get, and in fact he doesn't, it is agreed upon that 5 o'clock shadow is not popular in 1965. So, he's going to ask Sam Beckett a question. What is he doing in there? Of course, he's going to ask this question in Italian, which Sam does not speak. If he answers correctly, all that will happen is he will get a nice little shave. Though I'm not sure I totally trust Don Gino to shave me without cutting me, even if it's not his intention to cut me. But whatever. If Sam Beckett gets the answer wrong, he's going to get his throat cut. Don Gino asks him, "Are you ready?" And Sam says, "No," and starts laughing. Don Gino is not impressed by this stand-up routine. He says he's going to ask the question anyway. And like I said, he asks in Italian. The only word he picks up on is Teresa. So Sam thinks he's asking if he's sleeping with Teresa. So he says no. Don Gino does not react well to this. So apparently that wasn't quite the answer Don Gino was looking for. Sam tries to take a different track. So he repeats the only Italian word he's learned today. Volare. Which is when Al appears. And Don Gino is very confused by this answer, by the way. And that is because volare means to fly away, according to Al. And I'm rather surprised that Sam Beckett doesn't already have his throat cut, given the way he's responded here. But Don Gino is apparently a very patient godfather. Al tells Sam to repeat after him, because he knows what Don Gino wants to hear. And Al pretty much says in Italian what Primo said outside, and is the correct answer, the one that doesn't get Sam's throat cut. Terrific scene all the way around. It's tense, it's funny, it's well acted. It's just a really nice scene in this episode. Probably one of the best scenes in the series up to this point. This whole sequence goes on for like 10 minutes, which is like basically a fourth of the episode. Anyway, we cut to a scene where Primo is basically asking, "What were you thinking? Why did you decide to get a haircut there?" And the brothers defend him, saying, "Hey, his hair is looking pretty good. Better than the haircut you get at Angelo's." And Primo points out, "You don't get your throat cut at Angelo's." I don't know if that's true or not, but I'm going to take his word for it. Primo goes on to say that the only reason that Gino believed him at that moment is because of the bullet that Primo took for him. And he needs to find the person that Teresa is sleeping with. Cheating on Don Gino, even though they're not really in a relationship, other than in Don Gino's mind. Putting Sam Beckett in a situation where he basically has to find himself, because he's the one. Nice little bit of dramatic irony there. The episode doesn't really do anything with it, but it's nice nonetheless. I am curious as to why Primo doesn't suspect his son. Why he doesn't make the connection that maybe Frankie going in there and getting a haircut from Teresa is because he's the one sleeping with Teresa. Primo and the brothers depart. Al reappears, and he eventually figures out that Teresa was the one that Sam was sleeping with when he leaped in. Al finds this very interesting, that it's going to make retrieving Sam that night very, very interesting. Sam starts to get excited at the prospect of going home. But maybe after hearing this insane plan that he's about to hear, he will be significantly less so. Step 1. Sam must plug a hairdryer at a house located in Buffalo, New York. Okay, already I'm wondering, where the heck did Ziggy come up with this plan? What possible calculations could this machine, this hybrid computer, have made to arrive at the conclusion that Sam needs to plug in a hairdryer in Buffalo, New York in order to leap? And 13 minutes later, Sam must be in the place he originally leaped into, which is something that Sam points out is impossible. But Sam comes to the conclusion that he could simply send the brothers to Buffalo, New York to plug in the hairdryer. Yes, folks, this is a real plot point in this episode. This is a real discussion happening right now. Al asks him, "You trust your leap to them?" And Sam points out, "I'm trusting you and Ziggy for some reason after hearing this hairdryer plan, but whatever." And lastly, Sam Beckett must be participating in the activity that he was engaging in when he leaped in. In other words, making time with Teresa in Don Gino's attic, which is surely not going to get him or her killed. Sam's brother is borrowing a hairdryer from Teresa, which is kind of funny, and the brothers take off for Buffalo, New York. Meanwhile, Sam makes a phone call to Teresa, saying he wants to meet up tonight. Teresa is excited, but Sam says she needs to meet him by 4 o'clock. But she doesn't close till 5. And Sam says, "But this is important. It has to do with our future." And Teresa asks, "You think we have one?" And Sam replies, "Of course we have one. I'm not so sure of that." And Teresa is heartwarmed. She asks, "Where do you want to meet?" And Sam replies, in the most hesitant and hilarious fashion possible, Don Gino's attic. And of course, Teresa reacts shocked, to say the least. And her reaction is every bit as hilarious as Sam's line delivery. Sam goes on to say, "Because you were terrific in the attic. The best you've ever been." And this apparently overwhelms her survival instinct, because she starts asking questions about places that they've been, and asking if she was better than those places, while sliding into a chair in a way I couldn't possibly describe, but it's pretty great physical acting from Terry Garber. And then she flips off her shoes in kind of a funny way. It's great acting. And Sam borrows her catchphrase, "If I'm lying, I'm dying." And apparently, this is enough to convince her to risk her life, to possibly die in Don Gino's attic. Cut to a scene where they start making out in Don Gino's attic. And we immediately learn in the very next scene that Don Gino has gotten wise to what's going on. He learns that they are in the attic, and he pretty much seems intent on killing them and teaching them respect. In that order? Not sure. Meanwhile, the brothers have located the house, and it turns out to be the house of some kind of fraternity. Cutting back to Teresa and Sam. Sam wants to know the time. Teresa's like, I'm really hot here, like hotter than anything, and you're over here asking about the time?" And Sam says it's critical to their future. And Teresa suggests that, is it kind of like the stars needing to be aligned in the right place? Sam says, yeah, that's it. Sam gets up and starts talking about something, basically involving astronomy, saying that the certain star needs to be aligned with something. Yeah, I can't really recap that. But Teresa is impressed by his knowledge. Cut to the brothers in their adventure of trying to plug in a hairdryer. A fraternity person is not very impressed by this effort. He starts to threaten the brother, and the brother takes out a gun, convincing the fraternity guy to maybe back off a little bit and be a little bit more helpful. He plugs the hairdryer in and turns it on at the correct time. And then all of a sudden, the lights start flickering. And the electrical line starts sparking. Well, that doesn't seem like a good sign. Cut once again to Sam and Teresa making out. Sam keeps trying to break away, saying something about needing to be at bingo, which makes Teresa incredulous. I'm about to be awesome, and you're thinking about bingo? Specifically, she implies that Frankie is going to threaten the priest to make sure that nobody can win at bingo. Sam is shocked that he would coerce a priest, and Teresa asks him, "What's going on here?" And Sam says, "Nothing," unconvincingly. And Teresa says, "Yeah, that's for sure. I risked my life and limb to come up here. And you're acting like a Pinocchio." I don't get the reference. I suppose I could try to look it up. In fact, hold on a second. Let me do that. And after doing so, it seems to be the Italian and polite way of saying queer, as in gay. Okie dokie. Sam starts to tell Teresa that he's not the Frankie that she knows. And she says, "Boy, is that ever right." And he goes on to say that he can't lie to her. And she asks, "Why stop now?" And eventually she says, "Frankie, I know guys lie to me to get what they want from me." Sam tells her that she deserves better than that. And Terry laughs and says, or not Terry, the actress is Terry, the character is Teresa. She says, "Why? Because I can cut hair?" And Sam gently says, "For starters, it's a gift. It's a talent that makes you special." He starts to passionately say that she's got a lot of things that make her special. She's funny, she's pretty. And Teresa stops him and says, "Frankie, don't say it if you don't mean it." Sam puts his hands on her shoulders and says, "I don't know about the old Frankie, but this Frankie is telling you that you are special." And I complained or criticized Scott Bakula's performance in the previous episode in How the Tessers Won. Here, he's pretty great. He's on form. He is Sam Beckett, as we know him. Teresa says, "God help me, I believe you," through tears. We cut to a power plant of some type. Alarms are going off, and it's becoming pretty clear that the hairdryer is causing a blackout. Cut to Sam and Teresa, still in the attic, making out hardcore this time. And sadly enough, they are interrupted by Don Gino holding a gun. Well, that sort of kills the mood now, doesn't it? At least he's polite about it because he says, "Excuse me." But Don Gino is not happy. Sam is quick to take the blame. He says, "It's all my fault. I tricked Teresa into coming up here." But then Teresa tries to take the blame. The power goes out, which distracts Don Gino just in time for Sam to go after him and try to grab the gun. The gun goes off. They're struggling for their lives. And right then, Sam Beckett leaps. But he doesn't go very far. He leaps into Don Gino, which is what ends the fight. Now, that's another thing that's interesting about this episode, is that it actually has more than one leap take place. In a regular episode, Sam leaps in, and then Sam leaps out. Here, he leaps in, leaps into another person, and then ends up leaping away. Off the top of my head, I can only recall one other episode in which there's multiple leaps like that. The 5th season premiere, the Lee Harvey Oswald episode. And actually, come to think of it, the series finale has a few more leaps than usual too. Sam, as Don Gino, is kind of dazed and just kind of wandering around in the background. Frankie has just leaped back in, and this is one of the few times we see a leapy return. He's in the same place with Teresa, so it's really hard to find out what actually happens to a leaper when they return. from this. The question is, how do they react when someone else has been leading their life for a while and they come back and everything's different? Some have suggested that they retain some of the memories from Sam Beckett having been there, so they have some clue about what's been going on. I'm not sure that this is actually supported by the series in any way, and it's not supported here. Meanwhile, Teresa's attitude from this point on is just very weird, because from her perspective, she was just in a life and death struggle, and as far as she knows, Don Gino is not done wanting to kill them. But she's not acting like her life is in danger. It's not at this point, but she doesn't know that. Sam ends up approaching him and asks Frankie if he really wants to be with Teresa, if he's in love with her, and Frankie says yes. And Teresa too is in love with Frankie. But Sam has a dilemma. If they're going to make this official, they have to do so in such a way that Don Gino can't back out of it, can't go right back to trying to kill them. Sam's solution to the problem is simple. Have the priest at bingo announce the upcoming nuptials. This will be public enough that Don Gino will not be able to stop it or reverse course. I'm not so sure that's true, but whatever. In the scene where Sam pulls this off, he also tells Frankie that he's out of the family business. No more bingo bango. That's even more unenforceable. What's to prevent Don Gino from being like, no, you're still working for me when he comes back? Sam wanders over into a private corner somewhere, which is when Al appears. No longer wearing the Hawaiian shirt that I totally envy and want. He's now wearing a Russian-like fur coat. Because while the desert is hot during the day, it's super duper cold at night. But nevertheless, Ziggy is going to turn on the environmental controls again. Because he's given up on Sam. He's lost faith. And he blames Sam for not following his instructions to the letter. Or her instructions. Where exactly did Sam not do that? And Al points out, whoever heard of a lousy hairdryer causing out the East Coast blackout? Anyway, Sam thinks that now that he's Don Gino, whatever he was sent there, whatever wrong he was sent to correct, he might not be able to correct it. And that means he might be Don Gino forever. But Al says, hey, that's not true. You won't be Don Gino forever because he's going to get knocked off by the Caruccis in April. Hey, if you're the godfather, can you step down? Or do they have you killed if you step down? Because there's no reason Sam actually has to remain a mob boss for the rest of his life. Or before April when he gets murdered. But Al tells him to relax. He knows what he's there to do. Sam wanders over to the priest, who's playing bingo with the old people, and he asks to call a number. He does so, and a woman celebrates, and Al waves at him, and Sam weeps. Okay, that's kind of a similar note to how we ended the last episode on. I'm not sure it's wise to do that again. But whatever. So, this episode, not quite as good as I remember it, but still there's plenty of strong scenes, plenty of strong acting, a terrific guest cast, plenty of reasons to check out this episode. It's worth it for the zany, silly Ziggy subplot, if nothing else. The next time I join you guys for a Quantum Leap rewatch, it'll be for The Color of Truth, another excellent episode of the first season. And then after that, we got my favorite episode of the season, Kamikaze Kid, which I can't wait to talk about. If you like this video and want to support the channel, there are a number of ways to do so. You can follow me on Twitter at Core Productions. You can join my Corman Productions Facebook group. You can buy something from the Corman Productions store on Zazzle. You can buy me a copy, which is another way to support content creators such as myself. And of course, you can like, share, and comment on this video, as well as subscribing to my channel. This is Dave from Corman Productions, signing off.